Single dad gives his last bus ticket to a stranger. Days later, she showed up and changed his life. Rain poured like regret, not a drizzle, not a storm, but a slow, deliberate confession from the sky. On 42nd Street, under the haze of half-lit street lamps, a woman ran barefoot. No purse, no coat. Her satin dress clung to her like a second skin soaked, shredded, and far too elegant for this kind of street. Behind her, a black SUV rolled slowly predatory. The kind of car that didn't chase you for fun but for ownership. She didn't scream. She didn't stop. But the look in her eyes said, "Enough, help me. Please. Someone. Anyone." A few blocks down at a tired old bus stop shelter barely holding together, Ethan Miller sat hunched beneath a dim bulb. In his arms, his 6-year-old daughter Lila slept against his chest, feverish and small, wrapped in a thin jacket, 2 winters old. Ethan glanced at the bus schedule. Last one for the night. He dug into his coat pocket and pulled out a handful of coins. 342s. Enough for 2 fares. Barely. His back ached, his stomach was hollow, but his arms never loosened around his daughter. Then, the sound of running feet. Wet, panicked, unmistakable. The woman stumbled into the shelter like a ghost torn from a mansion. Makeup smudged, hair tangled, eyes wide. Ethan stood slightly not to intimidate but to observe. He'd seen enough people on the edge to know the difference between danger and desperation. "You okay?" he asked, quiet and low. I just need to get out of here," she said, shivering. "I lost my phone, my wallet. I need a ride. I just need to get away." At that moment, the city bus screeched to a stop. The doors hissed open. "Fare?" the driver asked. I don't have any money," she admitted. "Please, "No fare, no ride," the driver snapped. His hand hovered over the door lever. Ethan looked at his daughter, then looked at the woman. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and held out the last of his coins. "Here," he said to the driver. "It's for her." The woman blinked at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that?" Ethan met her eyes. The rain slid down his face like tears he never allowed himself to shed. "I've had nights like that," he said softly. "Someone should have stopped." The driver grunted and waved her in. She stepped onto the bus, glancing back just once. He wasn't looking. He was holding his child tighter as if she were the only warmth left in the world. The next morning. 50th floor of Reed Tower. The headlines screamed from the front page, "Alexis Reed vanishes from high-profile engagement gala." Alexis sat in her penthouse apartment, hair still damp from a too-long shower, wearing an oversized sweatshirt and silence like armor. The dress from last night lay crumpled in a heap beside her. Her coffee sat untouched. Her assistant entered cautiously. "Ms. Reed, the press is in a frenzy." "They always are," she murmured. "We need to know how you got home." "Should we track down?" Don't she cut in. He blinked. "Ma'am, I don't want his name. I want his kindness." She looked out the window, her voice distant. "He didn't ask who I was. He didn't offer advice. He didn't try to impress me. He just saw someone alone in the rain, and he stopped." She folded her arms, hugging herself. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who only help you when someone's watching. But last night, no one was watching. And someone still helped." She whispered more to herself than to him, "I want to find that kind of person. The kind who disappears before you can say thank you." Meanwhile, back in Brooklyn, Ethan set a bowl of oatmeal on the counter. Lila stirred on the couch, blinking up at him. "Daddy, were you a superhero last night?" He smiled gently. "No, sweetheart. But you helped a princess in a shiny dress." He brushed her hair behind her ear. "Maybe." Lila leaned in closer. "Why'd you do it?" Ethan kissed her forehead. "Because nobody should be left standing alone in the rain." That night, Alexis sat at her window barefoot and still. The city glimmered below, full of noise and power. But in her mind, all she could see was a man soaked to the bone, cradling a sleeping child and handing over everything he had to a stranger. She opened her laptop and typed Ethan Miller, delivery driver, Brooklyn. No results. She leaned back exhaling, but this time she smiled. The world forgot to name its real heroes, she whispered. But I haven't. The day had barely begun, and yet the city already roared horns, sirens' lives colliding at the speed of ambition. But on the 50th floor of Reed Tower, in a penthouse lined with glass and silence, Alexis Reed stood barefoot by the window clutching a steaming mug of black coffee she hadn't touched. She wasn't thinking about stocks, not about mergers, not about the engagement she'd walked out of the night before. She was thinking about him, the man in the rain, the man who didn't ask, the man who simply saw her. Still no results, Alexis asked, not turning around. Her assistant, Carter, shifted uncomfortably at the edge of the room. We pulled surveillance from the block, narrowed it down to a 5-minute window. The buses don't have onboard facial ID, any more privacy laws. The best I can tell you is that he got on Route 53. Paid cash. No trace. No trace, she echoed as if tasting the words. That kind of man usually leaves no footprints, Carter added, more to fill the silence than to be helpful. Alexis smiled faintly. That kind of man is exactly the kind this city doesn't know how to keep. She set the mug down and turned her voice steadier now. You spend your life being chased by cameras' headlines, men with monograms stitched into their shirts, and then one night someone gives you his last $3 and disappears before you can say his name. Across the city, in a cramped but tidy apartment above a hardware store, Ethan Miller was folding laundry with one hand while holding a half-eaten granola bar in the other. Lila, where's your other sock? Which foot? He chuckled. Left. Check the fridge, she called from the bathroom. I put Mr. Elephant in there so he'd be cold enough to go on an Arctic mission. Ethan shook his head, amused. You're going to make a great scientist or a wildly disorganized spy. Lila peeked around the door. You smiled. He looked up. What, you don't smile like that, unless something happened, she said matter-of-factly like a miniature detective. He paused. And then I helped someone last night. She blinked. Like superhero help, or just opening the door help? Neither, he said. Just being the person I wish someone had been for me once. Later that afternoon, Ethan loaded up his delivery van for the evening shift. Brooklyn was gray sticky with leftover rain and promise. He double-checked the address, Reed Tower Lobby Pickup. He exhaled. Again, when he arrived, the lobby smelled of new marble and expensive indifference. He placed the pastry box on the counter and was about to leave when the receptionist said, Wait. Ms. Reed asked if the delivery driver comes up, to bring it to her personally. Ethan blinked. There must be a mistake. I'm not, she insisted. Said she hoped it would be you. He hesitated, looked down at his hands, rough from work flour, still under the nails. He wore a clean shirt, but not a crisp one. But something about the way she'd looked at him on that bus. He nodded. The elevator rose like a sigh held too long. When the doors opened, Alexis was already there, not in heels, not in silk. Just jeans, a t-shirt, and bare feet against polished floors. Their eyes met. And, for a beat too long, neither spoke. You found me, Ethan said simply. Alexis gave a half-smile. I wasn't sure I would. I thought about you too, he admitted. You did, she asked, almost surprised. He nodded. Not many people meet like that. Strangers. Rain. Silence. Kindness. She stepped closer, voice quiet. Why didn't you say anything that night I did? She tilted her head. But not about you. Not your name. Not why you helped. Because it wasn't about me, he said gently. You looked like you were drowning, and not the kind of drowning a name can fix. Alexis swallowed. She wasn't used to people answering questions like that. Wasn't used to people seeing her as a person, not a negotiation. They sat in the window nook city stretched beneath them. She passed him a cup of tea. It's Earl Grey. I don't know if you like it. I like anything someone makes without charging me for it. She laughed softly. You're different. He raised an eyebrow. Different how you don't want anything from me. You're not trying to impress me. You just are. He looked out the window, then back at her. When you lose everything, he said quietly, you stop decorating who you are. You just carry what's essential, like a suitcase you can't afford to lose again. She studied him. And what's in your suitcase? He took a slow sip of tea. My daughter, my hands, my word. She nodded as if understanding something she hadn't realized she was waiting for. I built empires, she said, but I don't think I've ever met someone who made 3 things sound like enough. When Ethan stood to leave, Alexis walked him to the door. Can I ask you something? She said, voice hesitant. He turned. Do you ever let people help you? His eyes flickered. Sometimes, he said, but I don't get offers very often. Well, here's one, she said. No strings, just coffee. Or maybe, one day, a favor in return. He smiled, tired but warm. We'll see. She watched the elevator close her reflection shrinking in the mirrored doors, and for the first time in a long time, Alexis Reed didn't feel like a brand. She felt human, and for a woman who had everything that felt miraculous. The next morning, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with Lila, watching her color with a broken crayon she refused to throw away. Why do you still use that stub? He asked, sipping instant coffee from a chipped mug. She didn't look up. Because it still works. He smiled, quiet and full. That answer, so simple, so true, had more soul in it than any boardroom pitch he'd ever heard back when his life still had neckties and office floors. Because it still works. Sometimes that was all any of us needed to be. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered, half expecting it to be another missed payment or a delivery reschedule. But it wasn't. Hi. It's Alexis. A pause. Ethan stood up and moved to the window. I don't think I gave you my number. You didn't, she said, but I have people. They're nosy. He chuckled. I figured. I was wondering. She continued if I could take you up on that coffee. Except this time it's on me. He looked back at Lila, now humming as she colored the edge of the paper like it was a sunrise. Can it be somewhere kid-friendly? He asked. A pause. Then, that's actually perfect. The cafe was tucked between a used bookstore and a vintage record shop in Brooklyn. It had real wood floors, glass jars filled with mismatched biscotti, and the kind of soft jazz that made you breathe slower. Alexis arrived first. No security, no heels, just a soft blue cardigan, and her hair pulled back like she was trying to remember what it felt like to blend in. Ethan walked in with Lila on his shoulders, her arms draped around his head like a sleepy koala. This is Lila, he said. She's the boss. Lila leaned toward Alexis with wide eyes. Are you a queen? Alexis laughed gently. Only on Tuesdays. Lila nodded as if that was a perfectly acceptable answer. They sat, ordered, and for a while they just talked about nothing in particular. The weather, the waffles, Lila's obsession with dinosaurs and spy movies. It felt normal, and somehow extraordinary because of it. Then Lila excused herself to the kids' corner with her juice and crayons. Alexis leaned in, voice lower now. You don't talk about yourself much. Ethan shrugged. Most of me is not worth putting on a brochure. I disagree. He met her gaze. It wasn't flirtation, it was honesty. The kind that made you want to take off your armor. All right, he said. I used to work in construction. Got laid off. Took every odd job I could find. Then my wife got sick. Real fast. One of those cancers that doesn't ask permission. Alexis listened. No pity in her eyes. Just presence. She passed 2 years ago. I've been holding the roof up ever since. And your daughter, she asked softly. She's what's left of the music in my life. Alexis pressed her fingers around the coffee cup. That's a beautiful way to put it. He smiled, but his eyes stayed somewhere far away. Yeah. Well, It sounds better than saying I'm tired every damn day. After the cafe, Alexis offered to walk them back to the subway. As they passed a bookstore window, Lila gasped and pointed. "Daddy." "Look inside." Candles flickered in little glass jars, each labeled with words like "Courage, Rest, Kindness." Alexis knelt beside her. "Want to go in?" Lila nodded furiously. Inside, the owner smiled and waved. Alexis picked up a candle, labeled Hope. "I used to hate that word," she said quietly. "Why?" Ethan asked. "Because it was always sold to me with strings attached. Hope, if you behave. Hope, if you marry the right man. Hope, if you don't embarrass the family." She turned the candle slowly in her hand. "But now, I think maybe hope is something you light for someone else, especially when they can't see their own way forward." She turned to Ethan. "You lit something the night you gave me that bus fare. You didn't just give me a ride, you gave me a reason to believe not everyone in this city is broken." He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her. Really looked, and then "You're not broken. You were just standing in the wrong kind of rain." Back outside, the sky was beginning to dim. The sun tucked itself behind the skyline like it too needed a break from the weight of the day. Lila tugged at Alexis's sleeve. "Can we light the candle tonight?" Alexis bent down. "Only if we make a wish?" Lila nodded solemnly. "I'll wish for waffles for dinner." They laughed. Ethan didn't. He was looking at Alexis with something else in his eyes now. Not romance, not desire, but recognition. Like he saw a version of her even she hadn't remembered. "Why me?" he asked suddenly. She looked at him. "Why did you want to see me again?" he clarified. "You could have forgotten me like 1,000 other people in this city. But you didn't." Alexis took a breath. And then, "Because you made me feel like I wasn't something to fix. You didn't look at me like a project or a PR problem or a rich girl melting in the rain. You looked at me like a person. And I forgot what that felt like." Ethan's shoulders softened, and something inside him, something tight and knotted, loosened just a little. That night, as Lila slept beside a glowing candle labeled Hope, Ethan stood by the window watching the lights of the city blink like uncertain stars. He didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was bracing for the next storm. He just stood still and let the warmth stay. The wrench slipped from Ethan's hand, clattering onto the concrete. Oil stained his knuckles. Sweat gathered under his collar. He wiped his brow with the back of his wrist and leaned into the open hood of the old Ford truck, its engine coughing like a chain smoker trying to start over. "Hey, Miller," the shop owner called from the front. "There's a lady out here asking for you." Ethan frowned. "A customer." The old man snorted. "If she is, she's not here for tires." When he stepped into the sunlit alley behind the garage, he stopped cold. She was standing there. Alexis Reed. In jeans, a cream blouse, and sunglasses that couldn't hide her from him anymore. Not after that night. Not after the coffee. Not after the quiet way she'd listened. "Wow," he said. "You really do find people when you want to." Alexis pulled off her glasses. Her eyes met his. "I was hoping I hadn't worn out your welcome." Ethan gestured around at the noise, the grease, the buzzing drill from the next bay. "You're a little overdressed for this neighborhood." "I've been overdressed most of my life," she said in places that meant far less than this. He didn't reply. She continued, voice gentler now. "I was wondering if you and Lila might join me for dinner. Nothing fancy, just food, conversation, a thank you." He hesitated. His instinct was always to say no. Life had taught him that anything too nice usually had a catch. But then he remembered Lila's face the day before, how she'd lit up when Alexis talked to her like she was more than a kid, like she was a person. "All right," he said finally, "but only if dessert's part of the deal." Her smile softened. "That's non-negotiable." The invitation led them to a quiet brownstone tucked in an older part of Manhattan, the kind of place that whispered luxury rather than shouted it. Alexis opened the door herself, No housekeeper, no chef, just the scent of rosemary garlic and something sweet in the oven. Lila skipped ahead, twirling. "This house smells like cartoons," Alexis laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." They ate in the glass-walled sunroom. The table was set with simple stoneware soft candles flickering against the sunset light. Through the window, the city glowed like a far-off dream. Ethan noticed how Alexis watched Lila more than the food. There was something raw in her gaze, not envy, but longing, like a woman realizing she'd spent years collecting everything except what mattered. "She's a good kid," Ethan said quietly, following her line of sight. "Came into the world, screaming stayed that way until she saw me cry for the first time. Then she just sat beside me, held my finger." He smiled. "She's stronger than I'll ever be." Alexis met his eyes. "You're wrong about that." He chuckled. "You say that now. Wait till you taste my mashed potatoes." But Alexis didn't laugh. "I mean it," she said. "You have something most people spend a lifetime pretending to have. What's that purpose? You love without apology, and you let her see you do it." Later, while Lila decorated cupcakes in the kitchen, Alexis and Ethan stepped out to the garden, a small patch of green lit by fairy lights and framed by old brick. There was a comfortable silence between them. And then, almost hesitantly, she asked if someone gave you the chance to start again, not charity, not a handout, just a clean slate, would you take it? Ethan stared up at the sky, breath-catching. "You know," he said, "when my wife got sick, I thought, this is the bottom. It can't get worse." But it did. I lost my job, my savings, my pride, and I learned that rock bottom isn't a floor. It's a place you live in for a while, until you stop trying to escape it. He turned to her. "So no, I don't believe in second chances. Not for people like me. We don't get invitations, we get eviction notices." Alexis stepped closer. "Maybe no one invited you back to life, Ethan, but that doesn't mean you don't belong in it." He looked at her, quiet and unsure. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone once told me I looked like I was drowning. And they didn't save me with money or advice. They saved me by sitting beside me. Silent, present, real." A long pause. The only sound was Lila's giggling in the kitchen and the rustle of wind through ivy. Ethan's voice dropped. "People like you don't knock on doors like mine." She didn't flinch. "Then maybe it's time someone did." After dinner, as Lila fell asleep, curled up on the sofa with a frosting-covered grin, Alexis handed Ethan a small paper bag. "What's this?" he asked. "Leftovers. And something else." He peeked inside. There was a small candle. On the label, written in her handwriting, "Enough. You don't have to be more. Not richer, not smoother, not shinier. Who you are, right now, is enough." Ethan's throat tightened. He looked at her, his voice barely audible. "You have no idea what that means." She smiled, soft and real. "Yes, Ethan, I do." And for the first time in years, he believed someone did. There was a quiet buzz in the boardroom of Reed Enterprises. Mahogany walls, soundproof glass, the kind of room where empires were managed and risks were minimized. But Alexis wasn't paying attention to the quarterly forecast on the screen. She was staring at a photo paper-clipped to a thin manila file, a candid shot of Ethan holding a delivery bag in one hand and Lila's backpack in the other. A man, mid-step, mid-struggle, mid-life. Across from her, Victoria Grant, her longtime assistant, and the woman who knew every secret behind every merger, was not smiling. "You asked me to run a background check," she said, voice even. "So I did." Alexis didn't flinch, and Victoria slid the file forward. "Your Ethan Miller was once one of New York's fastest rising chefs. Co-owned a boutique restaurant in Tribeca. Rave reviews. Then it all fell apart. Lawsuits, bankruptcy charges of financial mismanagement. Eventually cleared, but the damage stuck. He disappeared from the culinary scene after that." Alexis stared at the report. Cold typeface. Legal jargon. A man's worst day reduced to bullet points. He was cleared, she asked. Technically, yes, but the press didn't care. His name was already dirt. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Lex, you're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. You can't afford to get tangled with someone the media will paint as a liability. I've kept scandals off your back for years. Don't hand-feed them one. Alexis's fingers curled around the edge of the table. You think I don't know what the press is capable of, she said softly. They fed on me like wolves when I was 19, all because I walked out of a charity gala with tears on my face. Victoria was silent. I'm not afraid of them, Alexis added. Not anymore. Maybe you should be. Victoria said, because this time they'll go after him. And he's not ready. Alexis looked down at the file again. A photo. A man caught mid-breath. He deserves a chance, she murmured. But does he want one? Victoria said. Or does he just want peace? The next evening, Alexis showed up at Ethan's apartment without a driver, without warning, and with nothing but a paper bag of pastries and a heart full of knots. Ethan opened the door in an old hoodie looking like he'd just put Lila to bed. Hey, he said, blinking. You okay? I need to talk to you. He stepped aside. Sure. Come in. She sat at the small dining table surrounded by Lila's coloring books and yesterday's mail. No chandeliers, no curated background music, just silence and the hum of a tired refrigerator. Alexis took a breath. I looked into your past. Ethan's jaw tightened. I had to, she added, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to help. I thought he cut her off gently but firmly. You thought I needed fixing. No, she said quickly. I thought maybe you deserved a door that opened instead of one that slammed. He sat down across from her, eyes steady. You found the headlines, didn't you? The lawsuits, the restaurant that crashed, the man who couldn't keep it together. I found the truth, she said, that you were blamed for a business partner's fraud, that you lost your career trying to protect your staff's paychecks, that you took the fall for someone else. He didn't answer, just stared at the table. I was trying to help you rebuild, she whispered. I thought maybe we could. But Ethan shook his head. You don't get it, he said quietly. You live in a world where second chances come with PR teams. I live in one where people don't even hold the door. You showing up in my life, that's like lightning striking twice and I'm the guy still holding the metal rod. She swallowed. You think I'm trying to save you? You're not, he asked. Alexis stood slowly. There was a tremble in her hand as she set the paper bag on the table. I wasn't trying to save you, Ethan. I was hoping you'd walk beside me, not behind, not beneath. Beside. But his expression didn't soften. He got up, walked to the sink, and stared out the window into the dark alley below. My world is small for a reason, he said. It's quiet. It's hard, but it's mine. You drop your name into it even once and the noise will swallow me whole. She stepped closer. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know he said, but good intentions don't change outcomes. She left without another word. Outside, the air was sharp with spring wind. Alexis stood on the curb for a moment, unsure whether to call a car or just keep walking. Behind her, Ethan stood in the window watching her go. His reflection in the glass looked like a man split between two lives. Later that night, as he tucked Lila in, she opened her eyes sleepily and whispered, Was the pretty lady sad? Ethan paused. A little. Did you make her sad? I think I did. Lila was quiet, then mumbled. You should say, Sorry, sad people need soft things. He kissed her forehead, heart heavy. That's the smartest thing anyone said to me all week. Back in her penthouse, Alexis lit the candle Ethan had left behind, the one labeled Enough. She sat on the floor, the city lights blinking behind her, and let the silence fill the room. She didn't cry, but she missed the sound of a little girl's laugh, and the man who didn't try to impress her, only to understand her. The rain had returned, not the romantic kind that made the city glisten, but the kind that slapped against windows like something angry, unresolved. It matched Ethan's mood. He sat in the dim kitchen chin, resting on his folded arms, staring at the eviction notice taped to the fridge. Final notice. He didn't need to read it again. He'd already memorized every word. Lila was coloring at the small table nearby, humming a soft tune, unaware of how close their little world was to unraveling. The knock on the door came like a warning. When he opened it, Mr. Carson, the landlord, stood with a clipboard and a practiced frown. "I gave you an extra week," Carson said. "I can't keep doing that. Look, Ethan, I got families lined up who can pay in full." "I know," Ethan said, voice flat. "I'll be out by Friday. No arguments, no pleading, just quiet defeat." Carson nodded, awkward. "You're a good guy, just tough times, I guess." Ethan didn't respond. He closed the door, gently walked back to the table, and knelt beside his daughter. "Hey, Munchkin," he said, managing a smile. "How would you feel about staying somewhere new for a little while, like an adventure?" Lila didn't even look up. "Can we bring Mr. Waffles? Who's Mr. Waffles?" She pointed at her scruffy stuffed bear. Ethan ruffled her hair. "Mr. Waffles goes where you go. That's the deal." She grinned, for her life was still simple, and he intended to keep it that way for as long as he could. Across town, Alexis Reed was drowning in noise. Her face was on every news feed, not because of her work, not because of her name, but because someone had leaked a story billionaire heiress mentor's ex-convict chef in secret romantic twist. The headlines were worse than fiction. The comments were crueler than strangers had a right to be. She slammed her phone face down onto the desk. Victoria stood beside her, expression tight. It was one of the board members. They hired a PR firm to dig into anyone you've spent time with in the last 3 months. Alexis's voice was low, shaking. "They used Ethan like a weapon." "They used you," Victoria corrected. "And he was the easiest target." Alexis swallowed. "How bad is it you've lost half of your support on the board? There's talk of voting you out." There was a pause, long, hollow, and Ethan Alexis finally asked. Victoria sighed. He lost his job, that part-time mechanic gig, Parents at Lila's school complained after the story went viral, said he's a bad influence. Alexis closed her eyes. Pain bloomed in her chest. "I tried to help him. I tried to honor what he'd done for me." "And you did," Victoria said. "But Lex, kindness doesn't always come with clean consequences." That night, she went to find him. She didn't call first. She just showed up, soaking wet hair matted to her face, breath fogging in the night air. Ethan opened the door in silence. They looked at each other. No umbrella between them. Just two people soaked in the fallout of good intentions. "You should have stayed away," Ethan said quietly. "You think I wanted this to happen?" she snapped, voice trembling. "You think I wanted your name dragged, your daughter shamed at school? That's not who I am." "No," he said, stepping back. "Then, what are you, Alexis? A savior? A symbol? Because ever since you walked into my life, I've lost more than I had to begin with." "You were barely surviving," she shot back. "You think that's something worth protecting? I was surviving on my own terms," Ethan roared. "And you came in like a miracle, but your miracles come with price tags. I didn't ask for a spotlight. I asked for quiet." Her face cracked. "So what?" she whispered. "You'd rather be left invisible. Unseen." "Yes," he breathed, "because invisibility hurts less than this." A long silence. Rain tapped on the threshold between them. Alexis took a breath. "I didn't come here to fix you. I came here because you were the first person in a long time who saw me without a headline attached. And I thought maybe I could be that for you too." Ethan's jaw clenched, eyes red. "You don't know what it's like to have your child looked at like she's less than because of me. You don't know what it's like to try and raise someone whole when you feel broken yourself." Alexis stepped back, her voice barely audible. "No, I don't. I don't know what it's like to have everything taken from me, but I know what it's like to give up everything and still not be enough." Her chest rose and fell as she whispered, "So if you want me to walk away, I will. But don't pretend I didn't care." He didn't stop her when she turned, didn't call her back when she reached the stairs, didn't notice the candle she'd left on the table half-burned labeled Truth. But Lila did. Later, after Alexis was gone, Lila padded out of her room in her pajamas, her teddy bear tucked under one arm. Daddy Ethan wiped his face quickly. "Yeah, baby." She pointed at the candle on the table. "That one's for her, isn't it?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" Lila climbed into his lap and whispered, "When people leave, and you still think about them, that means they're not really gone." He wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan let himself cry, not from shame or loss or fear, but from the ache of pushing away something he might never get back. It was raining again, though gentler this time, the kind of rain that doesn't soak but lingers like a memory. Alexis sat cross-legged on the floor of her penthouse, still in the oversized sweater she hadn't bothered to change out of since yesterday. Her hair was tied back messily, makeup long forgotten. The apartment around her was spotless, curated, and empty, everything in its place except her. She stared at the candle on her windowsill, the one labeled Truth. It hadn't been lit. She couldn't bring herself to. Somehow it felt like lighting it would mean she was ready to face what it would show her. Her phone buzzed. Not a headline this time, not a scandal, just a quiet alert from her assistant. Something was mailed to the tower today. Handwritten. No return address. "I thought you'd want it." Alexis almost ignored it. Almost. But something in her chest stirred. The envelope was small, child-sized, written in shaky blue marker to Miss Alexis, the lady with the golden hair. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper slightly crumpled, drawings in the margins, stick figures, a sun, a pizza, a little girl with curly hair holding hands with a taller one labeled You. The words were simple, spelled phonetically in places, but they landed like thunder. "Dear Miss Alexis, I hope you are not sad. I think maybe you are. Daddy tries to smile, but I know when his smile is tired. He misses you too, even if he won't say. You are the first person who made him laugh, like real laugh, like tummy laugh. That is special. Not many people do that. I wanted to say thank you for making my daddy feel big again. I hope you find you're happy again soon. I think maybe we're all just looking for someone who sees us. Love, Lila and Mr. Waffles." Alexis read the letter once, then again. By the third time, her hands were trembling. She didn't cry. Not right away. First, she stood up, walked to the window, and finally silently lit the candle. Truth. It flickered like a heartbeat. Meanwhile, back in the corner of a temporary shelter apartment 2 towns over, Ethan stirred his coffee slowly, absent-minded. Lila was drawing by the window as she often did when she was quiet inside. She hadn't mentioned the letter. She didn't need to. Ethan had seen her sneak it into the mailbox last week, her small hands fumbling with the flap, determined. He hadn't stopped her. A part of him hoped it wouldn't reach Alexis, that the universe would forget. That distance would do what pride couldn't silence what needed to be felt. But deep down, he also knew Lila's letter said what he couldn't, what he was too afraid to say out loud. Because what if Alexis had cared? What if everything she did wasn't about charity or image, but about him? That question lived with him every morning now. Every night, too. Alexis didn't show up in a limo. She didn't call ahead. She drove herself a rental barely clean to the old neighborhood where she knew Ethan used to work. The garage was closed. The little grocery store he used to stop by boarded up. But a clerk in the corner laundromat remembered a man with tired eyes and a daughter with a grin too wide for her face. He mentioned heading upstate, she said. Some shelter near Meadowbrook. Alexis drove for 3 hours with the letter folded in her coat pocket. No playlist, no headlines, just Lila's words echoing in her chest. I think maybe we're all just looking for someone who sees us." She found them just after sunset. The building was gray-cracked ordinary. But Ethan was outside sitting on a bench near the chain-link fence watching Lila race around with a group of kids, her laughter cutting through the fading light like a melody. He saw her before she said a word. Their eyes locked, startled, unsure. Alexis stepped forward, hand slightly shaking, heart louder than traffic. "I didn't come to rescue you," she said, voice quiet. "I came because your daughter sent me the kindest truth I've heard in years." Ethan blinked. "She's got a good heart," he said softly. "She's got your heart," Alexis replied. "That's the part you don't see. The man you keep trying to run from, he's the same man who raised her. And I would give anything to know how to be that brave." He looked down at his hands. Rough, calloused, not built for delicate things like feelings. "I'm not brave," he muttered. "You are," she insisted. "You gave up your pride to protect her joy. You've been surviving for so long you don't even realize you're worthy of more than just making it to the next month." A pause. Ethan finally looked up. "And what do you want?" "Alexis, I want to build something that lasts," she said. "Not from my last name. Not from headlines. From truth." She stepped closer. "And I want to build it with someone who once gave a stranger his last bus fare, because she looked like she needed to go home more than he did." His chest tightened. He remembered that night. The rain, her silence, that moment where neither of them asked questions, they just understood. Lila ran toward them, muddy sneakers and all, throwing herself into his arms. "Daddy." "I made 2 new friends." Ethan caught her, held her tight. "That's my girl." Lila turned eyes bright. "Hi, Miss Alexis." Alexis smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." Lila blinked up at her. "Are you staying this time?" Alexis looked at Ethan, then at Lila. "If it's okay, I'd really like to." Ethan didn't answer right away, but he nodded. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, the storm inside him began to quiet. The boardroom was silent. That rare kind of silence where air feels thick like something about to snap. Alexis stood at the head of the long glass table. Every chair was filled. Every eye on her. Some faces were familiar stern men in sharp suits, women with eyes trained to spot weakness like hawks. Her father sat at the far end, arms folded, expression unreadable. She took a breath, then another. "I'm not accepting the terms of the merger," she said finally clearly, "nor the engagement." A low hum of whispers began. Alexis, one of the older board members, leaned forward, voice like sandpaper. "Let's not make decisions based on personal emotions. Your alignment with the Caldwell family ensures the future of Reed Enterprises." "I am the future of Reed Enterprises," she interrupted, calm but firm. "And I refuse to mortgage my life or this company for alliances I don't believe in." Her father's voice cut through the room like steel. "You're throwing away everything we've built." Alexis turned to him. Her voice didn't waver. "No, I'm building something you never dared to. Something that isn't built on power, plays, and polished lies." A younger exec raised a hand tentatively. "Then what do you intend to do?" Miss Reed. Alexis looked around, not with the urgency of defense but with the clarity of conviction. "I'm stepping down. Effective immediately." Gasps, murmurs. Her father shot up. "You can't walk away. We need you in this seat." "No," she said softly. "You need someone who will follow the script. That's never been me." There was a strange kind of power in the silence that followed, not of dominance but of liberation. She walked out without looking back. Later that night, she sat in the back seat of a cab, no driver, no assistant, no security detail. Just her and the city she finally saw as her own again. She pulled out her phone and opened Lila's letter once more. The sun-drawn faces, the shaky handwriting, the sentence that had unraveled everything. "I think maybe we're all just looking for someone who sees us." She smiled. It was time to see him again, not as a project or a second chance, but as home. But when she arrived at the shelter, Ethan and Lila were gone. The front desk worker gave a sympathetic shrug. Left yesterday. Said something about not wanting to take up space someone else might need. Didn't leave a number. Alexis's throat tightened. She stood in the parking lot for a long time, the wind brushing against her coat like an old ache returning. Where would he go? Where did a man like Ethan, who'd built walls so quietly, so humbly, disappear to when the world shut him out? And then she remembered. The story he'd once told her over a half-eaten slice of banana bread. There's this old town, a few hours north, he had said. I used to go there with my mom. It had this bakery where they sold muffins the size of your face. Lila always wanted to see it. Alexis whispered the name under her breath. Clearbrook. The sun was setting when she arrived. Clearbrook wasn't much a strip of mom-and-pop stores, a gas station, a hardware shop with a faded open sign. She drove slowly down Main Street, until she saw a little chalkboard outside a shop window, Lila's light coming soon. She parked without even thinking. Through the dusty window she saw him. Ethan's sleeves rolled up sawdust on his shirt painting shelves with quiet focus, and Lila twirling in a circle pointing to corners and calling them cupcake zones. Alexis opened the door and the bell above rang out like a church bell in a quiet town. He looked up. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Then Lila gasped bright and wide. Miss Alexis knelt down just as Lila ran into her arms. Ethan stepped forward hesitating. How did you find us? Lila gave me a map. She smiled gently. Just didn't know I had to follow my heart to read it. He let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and a prayer. I thought you were done with all this. With me. I was done, she said softly. Done pretending. Done performing. Done living in a world where kindness is a weakness. She stood up, looked around the nearly finished shop. It's beautiful, she whispered. It feels like hope. Ethan shrugged his eyes, unsure. Still needs work. So do I, she said. Maybe we can figure it out. Together. Lila tugged on their hands, dragging them toward the corner. This is the reading nook. It needs beanbags. Daddy says we can't afford them yet. Alexis grinned. Then it's a good thing I just sold a building. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You're serious, she nodded. This place, it's not just a bakery, Ethan. It's a beginning. I don't want to own it. I want to belong to it. To you two. If you'll let me. He stared at her for a long moment, then stepped closer. You know the night we met. I thought you were running from something. I was, she replied. Now I'm running to something. His hand found hers. Solid. Honest. No rings, no promises, just presence. Then welcome home, he whispered. And for the first time in her life, Alexis Reed didn't feel like a name in a headline. She felt seen. She felt chosen. And as Lila giggled between them, spinning like a compass that had finally found north, Alexis knew this was the only empire she ever truly wanted to build. The first smell wasn't flour or sugar. It was sawdust. Ethan stood at the front of the shop, shirt stained with paint, hands raw with labor. Beside him, Alexis was seated on a crate trying to assemble a mismatched IKEA shelf with the kind of intensity that once closed billion-dollar deals. You know this is upside down, right? Ethan said, smirking. Alexis frowned, turning the piece over. Why do they make the diagrams look like ancient hieroglyphics? Because they assume you've built furniture before. She glanced up at him, her smile crooked. I've built companies, empires, fake relationships. I can handle a shelf. Bold claim. Hold my coffee. She grinned. He laughed, really laughed. And it did something to the air. Lightened it. Colored it with something that hadn't been there in a long time, comfort. Lila ran in moments later, a box of markers clutched to her chest. I finished the sign, she held it up proudly. Lila's Light Bakery and Hope Center, written in rainbow colors, the I in light dotted with a heart. Alexis knelt beside her. That's perfect, It's crooked, Ethan murmured, peering over. She's 6, Alexis whispered back. You're not allowed to critique her typography. Over the next few days, something rare began to happen. The building, which had once echoed with old pipes and peeling plaster, began to breathe. Neighbors started showing up. A retired carpenter named Joe brought extra nails. A college kid offered to repaint the faded exterior in exchange for a few meals. A single mother dropped off a crate of mason jars and said, "For the tip jar," or whatever else love needs. No contracts, no invoices, just hands, hearts, hopes. Alexis found herself doing things she never imagined. Washing dishes, frosting cupcakes, listening, truly, listening to people's stories as they walked in off the street just to say, "It's nice to see this place alive again." She started keeping a notebook, not for business plans or projections, but for people's names, dreams, struggles. One entry read Sam Widower, lost bakery job during COVID. Mrs. Kneading Dough says it was the only time his hands felt like they were doing something that mattered. She showed it to Ethan. "We should bring him in," she said, "not just to bake, but to heal." Ethan read the note and nodded slowly. "We're not just making bread here, are we?" "No," Alexis said. "We're making space." One morning, as the final shelves were installed and the smell of cinnamon began to cling to the walls, Ethan stood by the window staring out at the street. Alexis walked up beside him. "You okay?" He didn't answer right away. "Then I keep waiting for it to fall apart." She didn't laugh, didn't rush to reassure him. She just said, "Me too." That honesty Quiet shared was stronger than any vow. "But even if it does," she added softly, "it won't be because we didn't show up." He turned to her, then eyes full. "You showed up when I didn't even believe anyone would." She smiled. "You were the first person who ever looked at me and didn't see an empire. Just a person. I owed that back to you." "No," he said gently. "You didn't owe me anything. That's what made it real." Opening day came quietly. No ribbon cutting, no press releases. Just the soft clang of the open sign and the hum of a coffee machine warming up. A man came in first, early 50s, hesitant, hands shaking. "Heard you might be hiring. I used to work pastry back in the day." Ethan handed him an apron. Later, a young dad walked in with a baby on his hip and exhaustion in his bones. "I saw the flyer. You train single fathers?" Alexis smiled. "We train anyone who wants to build something good." By noon, the tables were full. The air smelled like cinnamon rolls and second chances. A small chalkboard hung by the counter. It read, "Baked goods paid with kindness." "Ask about our apprenticeship program. Everyone is welcome here." A reporter eventually showed up, local respectful. Asked if this place was a philanthropic venture. Ethan looked at Alexis. She shrugged. "No, it's a life venture." The reporter raised an eyebrow. "What's the story behind the name?" Alexis glanced at Lila, who was sitting in the corner helping a younger boy spell chocolate chip. She smiled. The light of one little girl. Reminded us that even in broken places you can build something beautiful. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and laughter still lingered in the air, Ethan stood at the back door, watching the sky shift to gold. Alexis came out beside him, wiping flour off her hands. "She's happy," he said, watching Lila run in circles with other kids. "I didn't think that was possible again." "You made it possible," she said. He turned to her. "I want you to stay." Her eyes searched his. "I wasn't planning to leave. But not just here," he added. "Not just in this bakery. I mean, in the life we're building." She reached for his hand. "I've had power. I've had titles. But I never had a place that made me feel safe. This place, this life, it doesn't scare me. It heals me." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're not perfect," he said. "And we've got a long way to go." "Good," she whispered. "Perfect's never been my thing." They kissed, Not like in movies, not desperate, not sweeping. Just true. That night, after the tables were cleaned and the doors locked, Ethan turned out the lights and left the sign glowing in the window, Lila's Light Open Hearts. Open hands. Open always. And in the quiet that followed, one could almost hear it, the heartbeat of something real, finally begun. The article hit the newsstands at 6:42 a.m. By 7:15, the bakery phone wouldn't stop ringing. By 8:03, a crowd had formed outside. Ethan stood behind the counter apron, dusted with flour hands frozen mid-whisk as Alexis came in from the kitchen, her phone clutched tightly in her palm. Her face was pale. "They found me," she said quietly. He didn't need to ask who. Reed Iris abandons board, hiding in small town with ex-cons and single dads. The headline screamed across the screen. It was accompanied by a photo taken without their knowledge, Alexis handing a cupcake to a child, Ethan in the background, laughing. "You see what they're doing," she said, voice trembling. "They're making us look like a scandal." Ethan looked at her, then looked at the bakery around them, at the people who'd come to rely on it, at Lila sitting in the reading nook with a boy whose father had just started apprenticeship. Then he took off his apron, walked outside, and stood on the sidewalk. The cameras turned immediately. One reporter stepped forward, aggressive. "Mr. Miller, what is your relationship with Alexis Reed?" Ethan blinked at the chaos, then stepped up to the mic someone shoved in his face. "I'm the guy who handed her a bus ticket in the rain," he said, "and she's the woman who handed me my dignity back." Murmurs. Another reporter called out, "Are you aware of the financial concerns surrounding Reed Enterprises? Is she hiding from accountability?" Ethan didn't flinch. "She's not hiding," he said. "She walked away from something broken and built something better. You want a story? Tell that one." Flashbulbs went off. A third reporter pushed in. "What do you say to people who think she's manipulating you? Using this place to cleanse her public image?" He smiled, the kind that cuts deeper than a yell. "Let me tell you something about image. You can't fake flour under your fingernails. You can't Photoshop the way she looks at my daughter like she's the most magical thing on earth. And you sure as hell can't buy the peace that lives in this shop." There was a hush. The crowd behind him had grown, and slowly, one by one, they stepped forward. Joe, the carpenter. Maya, the single mom. Even Sam, who hadn't spoken in public in years, raised his voice. "She gave me a reason to wake up again. She trained me when no one else would even interview me. She sat with me when my son was sick and never once asked for a photo op. It wasn't a press conference anymore. It was a testimony." Inside the shop, Alexis watched through the window, a hand over her mouth. Ethan didn't speak for fame. He spoke with the kind of quiet strength that said, "I don't need a podium to protect the people I love." When he came back in, she was crying. "I should have told you the risk," she whispered. He touched her cheek gently. "You didn't have to. I knew it. I chose it." She looked at him, eyes wide, with something deeper than gratitude. "Why?" she asked. "Because love doesn't ask to be safe," he said. "It asks to be brave." But the wave didn't pass quietly. The board of Reed Enterprises released a statement denying Alexis's departure was official. They hinted at legal consequences. Some investors called her unstable, others questioned her mental health. She received 3 letters from family attorneys. One even threatened to remove her voting shares entirely if she didn't return for reconciliation. Alexis sat across from Ethan at the bakery counter that night, exhausted. "They're trying to scare me back into being who I was," she said. Ethan leaned forward. "Then you scare them with who you are now." She looked up, startled. "You once told me," he said, "that being seen felt like freedom. Then, be seen, Alexis. Stand tall. Not because they deserve it, but because you do." The next morning, she released a statement of her own. It didn't read like a legal rebuttal. It read like a letter from someone who'd found the courage to come home. "I walked away from a boardroom to find a bakery. I walked away from applause to find silence that healed. I am not disappearing. I am reappearing in the most human way possible. She signed it, not as CEO, not even as Alexis Reed, just a woman who finally chose peace. The letter went viral. But more than that, it reached people. Women who'd walked away from careers to heal, fathers who raised children on their own, people who thought no one saw them. A week later, a package arrived at the bakery. No name, no return address. Inside, a single aged photograph. It was Alexis at age 7, standing in front of an oven with her late grandmother flour on her nose, joy in her eyes. Taped to the back a note in shaky handwriting. You were always more than what they wanted you to be. I'm proud of you. Grandma Rose Alexis stood in the kitchen and cried. She cried for the girl in the photo. She cried for the years she lost chasing approval. She cried because for the first time in decades she finally felt found. That night the bakery closed early. Ethan lit a candle on the counter, placed a cupcake in front of Alexis, and sat down across from her. "What's this for?" She smiled through tears. He shrugged. "You survived the fire and built something stronger from the ashes. So this is a celebration." "No," he said. "This is a promise that no matter what comes next, you won't face it alone." She reached for his hand, held it like it held her whole life. And somewhere between the candlelight and the quiet hum of the oven they knew the world could throw headlines, lawsuits, noise, but love had already passed the final test. The morning sunlight spilled over the bakery like a blessing. Golden light kissed the windows, dancing across the hand-painted sign, Lila's Light. Inside, the aroma of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air, not just the smell of pastries, but of beginnings. It was Lila's 7th birthday. She stood on a wooden stool behind the counter apron, too big tongue poking out as she carefully placed a strawberry atop a cupcake. Her small hands moved with determination. Alexis watched her from across the room, holding her phone. "Are you sure she wants to make her own cake?" she whispered to Ethan. He grinned. "She said she's the boss today. She always thinks she's the boss. That's because she kind of is." Alexis laughed soft and full, the kind that carried no weight of performance, only joy. Outside, the community was gathering not just for cupcakes, but for what had become a ritual. Saturday stories, music, hugs, coffee, and a reminder that the world could still be soft. There was Joe showing a boy how to sand wood. Sam laughing with a group of young fathers over burnt toast and fatherhood fails. And Maya was holding a bouquet of hand-tied flowers for Lila wrapped in newspaper and love. This wasn't a bakery anymore. It was a village, a heart made of many hands. Later that afternoon, Alexis sat with Lila on the front steps. "Do you feel older?" she asked. Lila thought about it. "I feel like my heart is bigger." Alexis blinked. "That's the best kind of older." The girl leaned her head against her shoulder. "Did you ever feel like that?" Alexis nodded. "Not until I met you and your dad." A pause. Then, in that way, only children know how to ask things that break you open. "Are you going to stay forever?" Alexis looked into her eyes, honest, trusting. "I want to," she said softly. "If your dad says yes." From behind them, Ethan's voice floated in. "Your dad says yes." Alexis turned to see him holding 2 mugs of coffee, wearing that crooked smile that had become her favorite thing in the world. That night, when the bakery finally quieted, Ethan and Alexis walked hand in hand through the back garden, a tiny patch of earth they'd planted herbs in, mostly half-growing but alive nonetheless. Ethan stopped. "Remember when you asked me if I'd take the chance to start over?" he said. Alexis nodded. "You didn't give me the chance," he said. "You gave me the why." She swallowed tears, blurring her eyes. "You taught me that falling isn't the end. It's just the beginning of standing up different." "And you taught me," she replied, "that love doesn't have to be loud to be true." He took a small velvet box from his back pocket. Her breath caught not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. Inside, there wasn't a diamond. There was a simple silver ring engraved with 3 words, "Lila's light lives." "This isn't a proposal," he said gently. "Not yet. This is a promise. To choose you not just when it's easy, but when it's quiet, when it's hard, when it's Tuesday and the sink's leaking and the muffins burned." She laughed and cried and nodded, then whispered, "Yes," even though he hadn't asked. 1 year later, the bakery had expanded. A second location opened in a nearby city run by one of their former trainees. They offered free weekend classes for single parents, sponsored school lunches, and trained dozens of people who never thought they'd matter to anyone again. Lila's Light had become more than a name. It had become a movement. And in the small cabin they called home just behind the bakery, life was quiet and messy and perfect. On a Sunday morning, Ethan sat on the porch with a coffee watching Lila chase butterflies in the garden. Alexis stepped out beside him, a blanket draped around her shoulders. "Do you miss the skyscrapers?" he asked. She looked at him for a long time. "They never made me feel this tall." He smiled, and in that moment, simple, sunlit, and real, Ethan finally understood something. Home wasn't a place you built with blueprints. It was a heart you built with love, with kindness, with second chances and burnt muffins and mismatched furniture and little girls who believed in magic. He pulled Alexis close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For getting off that bus." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You gave me the ticket," she said. He smiled. "But you were the destination." As the wind rustled through the trees and laughter drifted from the yard, the world felt still like, for just a moment, everything broken had found its place. And in the window of the bakery, lit by the fading sun, a sign still glowed. Lila's Light. Open hearts. Open hands. Open always. Because sometimes the smallest kindness becomes the biggest love story. And maybe that's all any of us really need. One quiet act of kindness. One open door. One person who stays. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it touched your heart, let us know in the comments which moment meant the most to you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who still believes in the magic of second chances. Until next time, take care of your heart and keep your light on.